gunshot cracked through the night air like thunder, and Cindy's entire body went rigid. She'd been walking toward her car, exhausted from a double shift at the hospital, her scrubs still smelling faintly of antiseptic and coffee. Now she stood frozen on the sidewalk as men in dark suits scattered across the street, weapons drawn, shouting in languages she didn't understand. Glass shattered. Tires squealed. Someone screamed. She should have run. Every instinct told her to turn around and sprint back into the hospital, back to the fluorescent safety of the emergency room where the worst thing she faced was an angry patient or a difficult IV insertion. But her legs wouldn't move. Her nursing training had prepared her for blood, for trauma, for death, but not for this. Not for the raw chaos of violence unfolding in real time just 20 feet away. A body dropped to the pavement near a black sedan. Then another. The air smelled like gunpowder and burnt rubber. Cindy's breath came in, short, panicked gasps. She pressed herself against the brick wall of the hospital, trying to become invisible, trying to will herself out of existence. That's when she saw him. A man in an immaculate charcoal suit stepped out from behind the sedan, completely calm despite the carnage surrounding him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair swept back from a face that could have been carved from stone. He moved like a predator, each step deliberate and controlled. His eyes swept the scene with cold calculation, and when they landed on her, Cindy felt her heart stop. Someone shouted something in Italian. A gun raised, pointing directly at her chest. The man in the charcoal suit moved faster than seemed possible. One moment he was 15 feet away. The next he had her pulled tight against him, one arm wrapped around her waist like an iron band, the other hand raised in a gesture that commanded absolute silence. "She's my fiancée," he declared, his voice carrying across the street with authority that made every person freeze. "Touch her and you die, all of you." The words hung in the air. Cindy could feel his heartbeat against her back, steady and calm, so different from her own racing pulse. The men with guns looked at each other, confused, calculating. The one who'd been aiming at her slowly lowered his weapon. "You never mentioned a woman, D'Angelo," someone called out from across the street, suspicion dripping from every word. "I don't answer to you, Marcello," the man holding her replied, his grip tightening slightly. "And if you value the alliance between our families, you'll walk away right now and forget you ever saw her." The tension stretched like a wire about to snap. Cindy wanted to scream, to tell them this was a mistake, that she didn't even know this man's name, that she was just a nurse trying to get home. But some survival instinct kept her mouth shut. Something in the way he held her, the way his fingers pressed warningly against her ribs, told her that speaking would be the last thing she ever did. Finally, after what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds, the men began to retreat. Engines started. Cars peeled away into the night. The street fell silent except for the distant wail of approaching sirens. The man, D'Angelo, didn't release her. Instead, he leaned down, his lips close to her ear, and whispered, "You belong to me now. Play along or die. Those are your only options." Before Cindy could process what was happening, before she could scream or fight or run, two more men appeared beside them. They weren't pointing guns at her, but they weren't exactly being gentle either, as they guided her toward a sleek black SUV that had pulled up to the curb. D'Angelo released her, only to open the rear door himself, gesturing with mock politeness. "Please," he said, though it wasn't a request. Cindy looked back at the hospital, at the bright lights and safety she'd just left. Then she looked at the blood on the pavement, at the way D'Angelo's men had positioned themselves between her and any possible escape route. She got in the car. The mansion appeared after 20 minutes of driving through increasingly isolated roads. It rose from the darkness, like something from a Gothic novel, all stone and iron gates and security lights that could probably be seen from space. Cindy had stopped asking questions after the first 5 were met with silence. She'd stopped crying after the first 10 minutes when she realized tears wouldn't help. Now she just sat rigid in the leather seat, her mind racing through possibilities, none of them good. Inside, the mansion was even more intimidating than outside. Marble floors, expensive art on the walls, men in suits stationed at every doorway, hands resting casually near concealed weapons. D'Angelo led her through the entrance hall and into what looked like a private study, all dark wood and leather chairs and a massive desk that probably cost more than her car. He poured himself a drink from a crystal decanter, didn't offer her one, and finally turned to face her properly. In the light, she could see he was younger than she'd first thought, maybe mid-30s, with eyes that were a startling shade of gray. Handsome, if you could ignore the fact that he'd just kidnapped her. "My name is Alan D'Angelo," he said, as casually as if they were at a cocktail party. "I run the D'Angelo family operations in this city, and 3 others. What you witnessed tonight was a business disagreement with the Marcello family. It would have ended with several deaths, including mine, if I hadn't improvised. By lying about me being your fiancé," Cindy managed to say, her voice hoarse. "Yes." He sipped his drink. It was the only thing that would make them pause. "The Marcellos have been looking for any excuse to start a war with us. But they also know that killing a made man's woman would unite every other family against them. It's one of our oldest rules. So you used me as a human shield." "I saved your life," Alan corrected, his tone hardening slightly. "You walked into the middle of an assassination attempt. If I hadn't claimed you, they would have killed you just to eliminate a witness. Now they think you're valuable to me, which means they won't touch you. At least not immediately." Cindy's hands were shaking. She clasped them together in her lap. "Then I can go home. Thank you for saving me. But I won't tell anyone what I saw. I'll forget this whole night ever happened." Alan laughed, a short, humorless sound. "No, you won't. You can't. Because right now, every family in this city knows that Alan D'Angelo publicly claimed a woman as his fiancée in the middle of a shooting. They know what you look like. They know where you work. If you go back to your normal life, they'll be watching you, testing the story, looking for cracks. And the moment they realize I lied, the moment they figure out you're not actually important to me, they'll kill you and use your body as a message." The room felt like it was tilting. Cindy gripped the arms of her chair. "That's insane. You can't just keep me here because of a lie you told." "I can, and I will." Alan set his glass down with a definitive click. "For the next several weeks, possibly months, you are Cindy, my fiancée. You will live here, under protection. You will be seen with me at specific events. You will learn our story, how we met, why I kept you secret. You will be convincing, or we will both die. Is that clear?" "No," Cindy said, standing up despite her shaking legs. "No, this is kidnapping. This is illegal. I have a job, a life, people who will look for me. Your supervisor has already been contacted. You've taken a sudden leave of absence for family reasons. Your rent will be paid. Your cat will be fed." Alan's expression didn't change. "I'm very thorough, Miss Chen. And you should know that there are exactly 3 people in this building who could tell me no and live. You're not one of them." The reality of her situation crashed over Cindy like a wave. She wasn't a person anymore. She was a prop in someone else's deadly game, a lie that had to be maintained to prevent something worse. The professional part of her brain, the part that stayed calm during codes and traumas, kicked in with cold assessment. Fighting wouldn't help. Crying wouldn't help. And right now, compliance was the only path to survival. "How long?" she asked quietly. "Until the situation stabilizes. Until the families accept the engagement as legitimate and move on to other concerns. Could be a month. Could be 6. Alan studied her face. "You're thinking about escape. Don't. My men are everywhere. The local police won't help. They're either paid off or too scared. And even if you somehow made it out of the city, the Marcellos would find you within 48 hours just to prove a point." A woman appeared in the doorway, older, stern-faced, carrying a velvet box. Alan nodded to her, and she approached Cindy, opening the box to reveal a ring. Not just any ring, a massive diamond surrounded by smaller stones that probably cost more than Cindy would make in 5 years. "Your engagement ring," Alan said. "You'll wear it at all times. Maria will show you to your room and provide you with appropriate clothing. Tomorrow, we'll begin your education on how to be a Mafia wife. Get some rest. You're going to need it." If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. Let me know what you think Cindy should do next. Cindy's room was actually a suite, more luxurious than any hotel she'd ever stayed in, with a California king bed, a marble bathroom, and windows that she quickly discovered didn't open more than a few inches. A cage, no matter how gilded. Maria, who turned out to be the housekeeper and apparently Alan's most trusted domestic staff, had laid out several outfits on the bed, all designer labels, all in exactly Cindy's size. "How did he know?" Cindy asked, holding up a dress. Maria's expression didn't change. "Mr. D'Angelo knows everything he needs to know. Breakfast is at 7. Don't be late." Sleep was impossible. Cindy lay in the enormous bed, staring at the ceiling, the diamond ring heavy on her finger. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the gun pointing at her chest, heard the crack of gunfire, felt Alan's arm around her waist. She was a nurse. She saved lives. She didn't belong in this world of violence and lies and casual murder. But she was here anyway, and the only way out was through. The next morning began her education in deception. Alan joined her for breakfast, along with a man he introduced as his consigliere, Vincent Russo, who looked like someone's friendly uncle until you saw his eyes. They had prepared a file for her, a complete fictional history of her relationship with Alan. "You met 8 months ago," Vincent explained, "at a charity gala for children's hospitals. You were there as part of the nursing staff giving tours. Alan was a donor. He was immediately taken with you. You were hesitant because you knew of his reputation. But he pursued you quietly, carefully. You fell in love with his hidden gentle side." "I don't have a hidden gentle side," Alan said dryly, buttering toast. "Then you'll have to develop one," Vincent replied, "at least in public. Cindy, you'll need to memorize this story. Every detail matters. The families will test you. They'll ask seemingly casual questions designed to trip you up. If you hesitate, if you contradict yourself, they'll know." Cindy flipped through the file. It was disturbingly thorough, including fake photos that had been digitally created of her and Alan at various locations. "This is insane." "This is survival," Alan corrected. "And speaking of which, you have a fitting this afternoon for appropriate evening wear. Tomorrow night, you'll be attending a dinner with the Castellano family. They're neutral in the current tensions, but they're also notorious gossips. Whatever you say will spread to every family within 24 hours. "I can't do this," Cindy whispered. Alan leaned forward, his gray eyes locking with hers. Yes, you can. You're a trauma nurse, Miss Chen. I've seen your employment records. You've talked suicidal patients off ledges. You've kept calm while someone was bleeding out on your table. This is just another kind of emergency, and you're very good at emergencies. The only difference is that this time, you're the patient too. He wasn't wrong. Cindy had spent years training herself to compartmentalize, to focus on the task at hand no matter how chaotic the situation. She could do this. She had to. The dinner with the Castellano family was a masterclass in tension. It took place in a private room at an exclusive restaurant, the kind where there was no menu and the bill would have paid Cindy's rent for a year. Antonio Castellano was older, gray-haired, with a kind of smile that never reached his eyes. His wife, Lucia, reminded Cindy of the sharks she'd seen in nature documentaries, all graceful movement and dead stare. Alan kept his hand on the small of Cindy's back the entire evening, a possessive gesture that made her skin crawl and probably saved her life a dozen times. When Antonio asked how they met, she recited the charity gala story flawlessly. When Lucia asked about the ring, Cindy managed to blush and say Alan had proposed on a beach at sunset, which was in the script, even though her heart was hammering so hard she thought it might burst. You seem nervous, dear, Lucia observed, sipping wine. I am, Cindy admitted, deciding honesty might be safer than lies in this case. Alan's world is very different from mine. I'm still adjusting. To the violence? Antonio asked bluntly. To the blood money that paid for that ring? Alan's hand tightened on her back, a warning. Cindy met Antonio's gaze steadily, calling on every ounce of her nursing training. To the danger, she said quietly. I save lives for a living, Mr. Castellano. Alan lives in a world where life is currency. It's an adjustment. But I love him, so I'm learning. Something flickered in Antonio's expression. Approval, maybe, or at least a grudging respect. The conversation moved on, and Cindy felt like she'd just passed a test she hadn't known she was taking. In the car afterward, Alan was silent for a long time. Finally, he said, You did well. I lied convincingly, you mean? Yes, which means you might actually survive this. He looked at her in the dim light. Castellano will spread the word that he believes the engagement is real. That buys us time. But the Marcellos are still skeptical, and they're the ones we need to convince. And if they're not convinced? Then they'll kill you to call my bluff, and the war starts anyway. Alan's voice was flat, matter of fact. So we'd better be very convincing. The weeks that followed developed a strange rhythm. Cindy learned to move through the mansion like it was her home, to greet the guards by name, to sit through long dinners where every word was weighted with hidden meaning. She learned which families were allied with the D'Angelos, which were neutral, which were enemies barely restrained by old traditions and older grudges. She also learned about Alan. Not the crime lord who ordered men killed with a phone call, but the man who read history books late at night, who personally checked on the families of his men who had grown up in this world and never had a choice about staying in it. She learned that his father had been killed in a power struggle when Alan was 19, that he'd taken over the family business to prevent his younger sister from being married off as a peace offering, that every brutal decision he made was a calculation to keep the people under his protection alive. It didn't excuse the violence, but it explained it. And against her better judgment, Cindy found herself starting to understand him. The night everything changed, Cindy couldn't sleep. She'd wandered down to the kitchen around 2 a.m, looking for tea, and found Alan sitting at the breakfast bar with a glass of whiskey and a file folder. He looked tired, the careful mask he always wore slipping slightly. "Can't sleep either?" he asked. Cindy shook her head, filling the kettle. "Too quiet. I'm used to the hospital, all the noise and movement. This place feels like a mausoleum at night." "It is, in many ways." Alan closed the folder. "I grew up here. My father died in the study. My mother in the bedroom upstairs. This house has seen more death than your emergency room. Is that supposed to make me feel better?" "No. Just honest." He studied her over his glass. "You're different than I expected." "What did you expect? Some terrified civilian who'd cry every day?" "Yes, actually." Alan's lips quirked slightly. "Instead, I got someone who argues with me at breakfast and asked one of my men about his daughter's college applications." "Your men are people, not robots," Cindy said, pouring hot water over her tea bag. "And that man, Carlo, his daughter wants to be an engineer. That's important to him. In my world, showing that kind of interest can be seen as weakness, manipulation. In my world, it's called empathy." Cindy sat down across from him. "We're not all trying to kill each other, Alan. Some of us are just trying to get through the day." He was quiet for a long moment. Then, almost too soft to hear, he said, "I can't remember the last time someone called me by my first name and meant it as something other than a threat or a seduction." The vulnerability in his voice caught Cindy off guard. This was the man who'd kidnapped her, who'd forced her into this nightmare. But he was also trapped. Just in a different kind of cage, one built by tradition and blood and choices made long before he was born. "Alan," she said carefully, and watched something in his expression shift. "Can I ask you something? If you could walk away from all this, would you?" "No one walks away," he replied automatically. Then, after a pause, "But sometimes I think about what it would be like. To be just a man, not a boss. To make choices without calculating who dies as a result." He looked at her directly. "Does that make me a monster?" "I don't know," Cindy admitted. "But monsters don't wonder if they're monsters." The moment stretched between them, something fragile and dangerous. Then Alan's phone buzzed, shattering the spell. He glanced at the screen, and his expression hardened back into the familiar cold mask. "Get some sleep," he said, standing. "We have another dinner tomorrow with the Rossini family. They're allies, but volatile. We'll need to be perfect." But Cindy noticed he didn't look at her as he left, like he was afraid of what he might see in her eyes, or what she might see in his. The attempted kidnapping came 3 days later. Cindy was in the library, genuinely reading, when she heard glass shatter somewhere in the house. Then gunfire, close and terrifyingly loud. She'd been instructed on what to do in this exact scenario, but knowing the plan and executing it while adrenaline flooded her system were two different things. She ran for the panic room, hidden behind a bookshelf, but she'd barely made it halfway across the room when the door burst open. Not Alan's men. Different faces, different guns, same dead eyes. One of them grabbed her arm hard enough to bruise. "The boss wants to have a conversation with D'Angelo's little nurse," he said, dragging her toward the door. Cindy did what her self-defense instructor had taught her years ago. She went limp, became dead weight, then drove her elbow up into the man's throat. He released her with a choked gasp. But there were two others, and she knew she was outmatched. Then Alan was there, and the violence that followed was swift and brutal and efficient. He moved like a force of nature, and in less than 30 seconds, all 3 men were on the ground, 2 unconscious, 1 very dead. Blood splattered the antique rug. Alan grabbed Cindy's shoulders, his eyes wild with something that might have been fear. Are you hurt? Did they hurt you? I'm okay, she managed. Alan, I'm okay. He pulled her against his chest, and for the first time since this nightmare began, Cindy felt safe. Not because of the mansion or the guards or the rules of the Mafia world. Because of him. This man who killed without hesitation, but whose hands were gentle on her back, whose heartbeat was as frantic as hers. They were Marcello's men, he said quietly. This means open war. They came into my home. They tried to take you. There's no coming back from this. What does that mean? Alan released her, his expression grim. It means everything I've been trying to prevent is about to happen. It means a lot of people are going to die. And it means you're not safe here anymore. Over the next week, the mansion transformed into a fortress. More guards, more weapons, fewer people allowed in or out. Cindy watched from the windows as black cars came and went at all hours, as men in suits had tense conversations in the courtyard. She heard raised voices from Alan's office, planning and plotting and preparing for war. But she also saw the cost, the exhaustion in Alan's eyes, the way his shoulders stayed tense even when he tried to relax. The morning she found him asleep at his desk, still in yesterday's clothes, a gun within arm's reach. She'd spent her whole adult life trying to heal people, trying to make things better. And now she was at the center of something that would only end in more death. The thought was unbearable. So Cindy did what she thought was right. She made a choice that would change everything. One of the neutral family representatives, a man named Gabriel Marconi, had given her his private number at a dinner 2 weeks ago. If you ever need anything, he'd said, someone outside Alan's world. I knew your predecessor, the woman he was engaged to before. She called me once. I helped her. Cindy hadn't known Alan had been engaged before, but she tucked the information and the number away. And now, desperate to stop the war before it fully started, she used it. They met in a public park, broad daylight, where everyone could see, and therefore no one would dare start shooting. Gabriel was older, distinguished, with kind eyes that Cindy desperately wanted to trust. I want to help, she told him. This war doesn't have to happen. If I can convince the Marcello family that the engagement is real, that I'm not a pawn, maybe they'll back down. Gabriel listened carefully. Too carefully. That's very brave of you. Very selfless. Alan is lucky to have someone who cares so much about preventing bloodshed. I'm a nurse, Cindy said simply. I took an oath to do no harm. This feels like harm, all these people dying over a lie. Is it a lie? Gabriel asked softly. Are you sure about that? The question rattled something in Cindy's chest, but she pushed it aside. Can you help me arrange a meeting? With the Marcello leadership? I'll prove I'm real. I'll answer any questions they have. Gabriel smiled, and that should have been her first warning. Of course, I'll set it up. You're doing the right thing, Cindy. Trust me. She wanted to. God, she wanted to. Alan found out within 6 hours. Cindy was back at the mansion, feeling oddly hopeful for the first time in weeks when he stormed into her room without knocking. His face was white with rage, or maybe fear, she couldn't tell which. What did you do? He demanded. What the hell did you do? I'm trying to stop the war, Cindy said, standing her ground. I talked to Gabriel, Marconi. He's going to arrange a meeting with the Marcellos so I can prove... Gabriel Marconi, Alan interrupted, his voice deadly quiet, is the Marcello family's consigliere. He's been trying to start this war for 2 years. and you just handed him the perfect excuse. The blood drained from Cindy's face. No. He said he was neutral. He said he wanted to help. He lied. Just like I've been lying. Just like everyone in this world lies. Alan ran his hands through his hair, a gesture of frustration she'd never seen from him. They're going to interpret your secret meeting as proof that I'm manipulating you, using you as a weapon to destabilize their family. They'll claim you're a spy, that the engagement is fake, that I've been playing them from the beginning. And they'll be right about that last part, which is the worst thing. I was trying to help, Cindy whispered. I know. But in my world, good intentions get people killed. He looked at her, and for the first time, since she'd met him, Alan D'Angelo looked lost. The war starts tonight. Marcello is making his move, and you're now the primary target because they think killing you will break me. Will it? The question hung between them. Alan opened his mouth, closed it, then finally said, I don't know. And that terrifies me more than anything else in this nightmare. The attack came at midnight. Cindy was in the reinforced safe room with Maria, 2 guards, listening to gunfire and explosions that sounded like the world ending. The mansion shook. Glass shattered. Someone screamed. The lights went out and emergency power kicked in, bathing everything in red. It lasted for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes. When the door finally opened, Cindy expected to see enemies, expected this to be the end. Instead, Alan stood there, covered in blood that she hoped wasn't his, looking like something from a nightmare. We need to move, he said. Now. They evacuated to a safe house across the city, a smaller, more defensible location that Alan had apparently been keeping in reserve. The ride there was silent, except for urgent phone calls in Italian, Albanian, and languages Cindy didn't recognize. When they finally arrived, Alan dismissed everyone except his most trusted inner circle, then turned to Cindy. This is what you need to understand, he said, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. 5 of my men died tonight. 3 Marcello soldiers, a delivery driver who was in the wrong place. The Castellano family is threatening to join the Marcellos because they think I engineered this whole thing. And the city's other families are choosing sides. By tomorrow, half this city will be a war zone. Cindy felt sick. Because of me. Because of me, Alan corrected. I made the choice to claim you. I made the choice to pull you into this world. You tried to fix it, and that backfired. But the original sin was mine. And now I have to make another choice. He pulled out his phone, pulled up a screen, and handed it to her. It showed a bank account with more money than Cindy had ever imagined seeing. That's yours. Passport in a new name. Tickets to anywhere you want to go. A contact who can get you set up in a new city, new identity. You can walk out that door right now, and by dawn, you'll be gone. The families won't follow because they'll be too busy fighting each other. You'll be free. Cindy stared at the phone, then at Alan. And you? I stay. I fight. Maybe I win. Probably I die, but that's been true since the day I was born into this family. His expression was unreadable. You didn't choose this life, Cindy. I'm giving you the choice to leave it. What do you want me to do? I want you to run, Alan said quietly. I want you to get as far from this nightmare as possible. I want you to go back to being a nurse who saves lives instead of being trapped in a world that only knows how to take them. I want you to be safe and happy and alive. That's not what I asked. Cindy stepped closer to him. What do you want? The mask finally cracked completely. Alan's voice broke as he said, I want you to stay. I want to keep you safe. I want to wake up and find you reading in my library. I want to hear you arguing with Vincent about moral philosophy over breakfast. I want to stop pretending that you're just a lie I told to survive and admit that somewhere in these past weeks, this became real for me. But I can't ask you to stay in hell just because I've fallen in love with you." The words hit Cindy like a physical force. Love. He'd said love. This man who killed people, who ran an empire built on violence and fear, who'd kidnapped her and trapped her in a nightmare, had just said he loved her. And the most terrifying part was that her heart had skipped when he said it. She looked at the phone in her hand, at her escape, at freedom. She thought about her apartment with the leaky faucet, her shifts at the hospital, her normal, safe, boring life. Then she thought about Alan's face when he'd burst into the library to save her, the vulnerability in his voice during their late-night kitchen conversation, the way he'd looked when he thought she might be hurt. This was insane. She should run. She should take the money and the new identity and never look back. Instead, Cindy handed him the phone. "Tell me how to stop this war." "Cindy, tell me. You said they think I'm fake, that the engagement is a lie. So what would prove it's real?" Alan stared at her. "You can't be serious. I'm a trauma nurse, remember? I'm good at emergencies. And right now, we're in the middle of one." Cindy felt strangely calm, the same calm that settled over her when a patient was coding, and she had to work the problem. "If I stay, if I publicly commit to this, if I make it clear that I'm choosing you in this life, does that change the calculation?" "It might," Alan admitted. "If you went public, if you stood beside me and claimed the engagement as real and chosen, it would shift the power dynamic. The families respect bold moves. They respect commitment. But Cindy, they would also never let you leave. Ever. Once you're all in for life. You'd be a target forever. You'd be as trapped as I am. Don't forget to like this video and share it with someone who loves intense storytelling. Your support means everything." "Then I guess we're both trapped," Cindy said. "Together." The press conference, if you could call it that, was held in neutral territory, a hotel ballroom rented by the Castellano family as mediators. Every major family had representatives there. The tension was thick enough to cut with a knife. Alan stood at the front of the room, Cindy beside him, his hand wrapped around hers like a lifeline. "I called this meeting," Alan began, his voice carrying across the room, "to address the rumors and accusations that have led to unnecessary bloodshed. The Marcello family claims that my engagement to Cindy Chen was a fabrication, a manipulation. They're wrong, and she's here to tell you why." Every eye in the room turned to Cindy. This was it, the point of no return. She thought about her nursing oath, about doing no harm. But she also thought about Carlo's daughter, about the delivery driver who died, about all the people who would die if this war continued. Sometimes saving lives meant making impossible choices. "My name is Cindy Chen," she said, her voice steady. "I'm a trauma nurse. I met Alan D'Angelo 8 months ago, and I fell in love with him despite knowing what he was, what he did, the world he came from. When he claimed me as his fiancée during the shooting, it wasn't a lie. It was the truth coming out earlier than we'd planned. I'm here, standing in front of every family in this city, to tell you that I choose this. I choose him. And anyone who wants to use me to start a war will have to go through me first." The Bahafer silence was absolute. Then Gabriel Marconi stood up, his face twisted with anger. "This is theater. You're reading lines." "No," Cindy said, and walked away from Alan, across the room, until she was standing right in front of Gabriel. Close enough that any weapon he had could reach her. Close enough that everyone could see she wasn't afraid. This is me making a choice. The same way you chose to lie to me, to manipulate me, to use my compassion against me. You almost succeeded. You almost made me the excuse for war. But I'm not anyone's pawn, and I'm not anyone's excuse. I'm Alan D'Angelo's fiancé. And if you want to contest that, do it now. Gabriel's hand moved toward his jacket. Alan was across the room in seconds, but it was Antonio Castellano who raised a hand and stopped everything. Enough, the old man said. The woman has spoken. She's made her choice publicly, in front of witnesses. By our oldest laws, that makes the engagement legitimate and binding. Any attack on her is an attack on the D'Angelo family. Any attack on the D'Angelo family over this issue is a violation of neutrality that my family will not tolerate. The matter is settled. The Marcello family does not accept, Gabriel began. Then the Marcello family stands alone. Antonio interrupted. I'm calling a vote. All families in favor of recognizing the engagement and ending this conflict. One by one, hands raised. Even some of the families Cindy knew were Marcello allies, because what she'd done was unprecedented. A civilian, an outsider, standing up to the assembled power of the city's criminal underground and daring them to make her a martyr. It was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. And in their world, the line between the two was very thin. Gabriel Marconi looked at Cindy with pure hatred. But he sat down. The vote carried. The war was over before it truly began, ended not by violence, but by one woman's choice to stand in the middle of the fire and refuse to burn. The aftermath was quieter than Cindy expected. No celebration, no victory speech. Just Alan's hand finding hers as they walked out of the hotel, his touch gentle despite the calluses and scars. In the car, he finally spoke. You didn't have to do that, he said quietly. You could have taken the out I gave you. I know. Cindy looked at the ring on her finger, the one that had started as a prop and ended as a promise. But somewhere between the kidnapping and the kitchen conversations and you saving my life, this stopped being about survival. It became about choice. My choice. Alan turned to face her fully, and in his eyes she saw something she'd never expected to find in a man like him. Hope. What are you choosing, Cindy? Really? You, she said simply. This terrifying, violent, impossible world. You asked me once if loving you made you a monster. I don't have that answer yet. But I know that monsters don't give their victims a way out. Monsters don't stay up at night worrying about the cost of their choices. You're not a monster, Alan. You're just a man trying to survive in a world that doesn't forgive weakness. And I choose to stand beside you while you do it. He kissed her then, soft and desperate and real. And Cindy kissed him back because this was her choice, her life now, for better or worse. The months that followed were an education in what it meant to be a Mafia wife. Not the glamorous version from movies, but the real thing. Attending funerals of men who died in service to the family. Learning to read the subtle power plays at dinner parties. Understanding that every conversation was a negotiation, every smile a calculation. But also discovering the unexpected community, the loyalty, the strange honor that existed even in this dark world. Cindy didn't quit nursing. Alan tried to convince her to, citing safety concerns, but she refused. You don't get to take that part of me, she told him firmly. I'm your fiancé, yes, but I'm also still me, and me saves lives. That's not negotiable. So they compromised. She worked at a private clinic that served the families, where her skills were desperately needed and security could be maintained. She treated gunshot wounds without asking questions, set broken bones for men who couldn't go to regular hospitals, and slowly earned a reputation as someone who could be trusted. The nurse who chose the life. The woman who stood up to Gabriel Marconi and lived. The wedding was planned for spring, a grand affair that would unite not just two people, but solidify alliances across the entire city. Cindy looked at the wedding dress fittings, the venue selections, the guest lists that read like a who's who of organized crime. And sometimes she couldn't believe this was her life. But then Alan would find her late at night, reading in the library or staring out at the city lights, and he'd sit beside her in comfortable silence. And she'd remember why she stayed, not because she was trapped, though she was. Not because she was afraid, though sometimes she was, but because somewhere in the middle of this nightmare, she'd found something real. She'd entered the Mafia world by accident, trapped by a lie told in desperation. But she'd chosen to stay, chosen to fight, chosen to love a man who lived in shadows and violence. The engagement that started as Alan's improvised survival strategy had become Cindy's deliberate choice to build a life in the darkness, to find light in impossible places, to rule beside someone who needed her more than he'd ever admit. The war never fully ended. It just changed forms, became quieter, more strategic. But Cindy Chen, the trauma nurse who walked into a shootout and came out a Mafia wife, had learned to navigate these dangerous waters. She was no longer innocent. She was no longer powerless. She was no longer the woman who froze when guns were drawn. She was Alan D'Angelo's fiancée, his partner, his equal, and God help anyone who tried to use that against them again. If you made it to the end of this story, thank you for watching. Hit that like button, drop a comment telling me what you thought about Cindy's choice, and subscribe for more intense stories like this one. See you in the next video.